Or a good morning or afternoon or evening from wherever you are joining us. Welcome to Beyond Labels Living and Thriving, the first plenary of the International Conference on Stigma. My name is Calvin Pugh, and I serve as the 340B Policy Director for Community Access National Network, or CAN, and I have the distinct honor of guiding today's conversation. I appreciate you all joining us from wherever you are in the world. This panel I know will be inspiring and thought-provoking. Stigma can isolate, silence, and harm individuals. It can also be confronted, challenged, and transformed. I'm humbled to moderate this powerful panel of individuals whose lived experiences across various stigmatized conditions or identities. Through open and honest conversations, they will share their personal journeys navigating stigma, how they've overcome discrimination and internalized shame, and practical strategies to foster empathy, inclusion, and self empowerment, and how in their own individual lives they have turned moments of marginalization into sources of strength and advocacy. Personally, this year in or next year in May, I will have been living with HIV for a decade. At times, stigma has been as sharp as an arrow to the chest. At other times, it has been a dull ache. Rejection, fear, misinformation continue to impact many of us who are attending this conference. I've always believed that it is not the outward manifestation of discrimination, but our own power to change our internal narrative that harms us the most. There is great power in how we speak about and to ourselves. I want to acknowledge my privilege. I am a gay man, cisgendered, who, yes, while living with HIV, I have certain privileges that aren't afforded to others. In many communities around the world, speaking about our challenges through health or our identities is a source of fear and even violence, and in worst cases, death. I have been able to live openly because of the people who come before me, and because I've never believed that something microscopic, that three letters of an acronym, have the ability to lessen mine or your value. I have always believed that saying aloud the things that other people are afraid to whisper has made me a voice and not a victim. So, with that, I would like to introduce our wonderful panelists, Kia and Mary. I will not try to butcher Mary's last name, but I invite either one of you to start and share your stories and share how stigma has impacted you and your community and how you have come through that.
Thank you, Mary. I saw the nod for me to start. So, guys, my name is Kia Belt Robinson. While I work for the National Math and Science Initiative as a program design and innovation manager, where we support children furthest from opportunity, we support children very much like my daughter. I am the mother of a beautifully neurodivergent human who is navigating the world through the lens of autism. When I first met Calvin, and he was just talking to me a little bit about my daughter and my story, I was explaining to him that when I thought about what stigma looks like, not just for those navigating the world through the lens of autism, but for the villages that support them, for myself as a parent, I realized that the first thing that I had to do was grieve normalcy. I remember very vividly advocating for my daughter to be tested. She was 2 years old. At the time, she was still nonverbal. I noticed stimming behavior, but I'm an educator. So when I spoke to her pediatrician, I was hit with the which could have been reality that I was projecting. I typically worked with very high functioning children. Several of those children also were on the spectrum because oftentimes we think of autism just into two lenses. I was sharing with Calvin that I recognized very quickly um, how harming the single story is when it comes to the autism community. We see autistic children as either savants, like Rain Man, or very high needs and low functioning. But for those kiddos like my daughter who fall in the middle, we generally don't see their stories represented. However, they still live with the same shame and stigma that comes from oftentimes for them living with a silent and invisible disability. At that time, I did not know what my daughter's life was going to look like. I knew what birthing trauma she had experienced. I knew in so many ways that her prognosis could be that she never spoke. At that time, I recognized to be an informed, an educated, and impactful advocate for her that I had to separate my idea of what normal was going to look like for her and allow her to be the guider of what normalcy looks like. That has come with a lot of challenges, particularly when we're out in public and she's stimming and people look at that behavior as abnormal. I've recognized that in those opportunities, as parents of neurodivergent kiddos, we often quickly usher them out of the situation. However, I often in those moments try to lean in. I allow her to experience what she's experiencing, even if it's sensory overload, even if it looks like a meltdown. In that space, I try to get her to a space where she can safely regulate. And I often use that as an opportunity of education. When I see the incredulous stares, I stop and say, hey, she's autistic. We're experiencing a meltdown. If you would like to help, you can come down on our level, maybe help give her a squeeze. I invite people into the space with us. As parents of neurodivergent kiddos, I see Angela in the chat, who is also a mother of a young adult with autism. We know the shame that we feel. We feel like we failed our kids. We feel like it's our fault. I know for myself, I scrutinized every moment of my pregnancy. I scrutinized every moment of delivery. I tried to find the systemic why. I did all the testing. I took her through everything possible, genetic testing. I wanted an answer. It was in that searching for an answer that I realized that I was actually instilling shame and stigma in her. I was telling her that she was not created well and good. So I stopped. Yes, we get therapy. Yes, we do all the things. Yes, we have, all the help through Kennedy Krieger here in the Baltimore, Washington area. She has all the scaffolded supports in school. But I had to recognize that she was created just like this, and she is good, and because of that, she has value in the world. And because she has value in the world, I allow her to guide a lot of what her care looks like. One of the things outside of just the parent blame I placed on myself, very early on, I tried to shield her. I tried to isolate her. I tried to shield her from things that would keep her from having a meltdown. I created social barriers in many ways. And yet again, reaffirming to her that her difference made her not worthy of being in those social settings. I didn't recognize at that time, particularly, like I said, she was diagnosed around 2.5. At those pivotal years of her really learning how to be a friend and how to socialize in the world, when I was creating those social barriers and social structures, that I was helping her to internalize that shame and stigma because I was reinforcing through my actions what so much of the world sees about her. She is Black, she is female, she is autistic, she is triply marginalized. I was instilling in her that in some way she was broken. Of course, I was doing it unknowingly. There was no harmful intent behind it, but intent and impact are very different. I was teaching her that she had to mask, to be acceptable. When that conviction hit me, I really had to sit with the intersectionality of race and gender bias and how that shows up in the neurodivergent community. Already, as a Black female, she is told to not take up space. She's told to be quiet. She's told that her existence in itself is aggressive in many ways. She's told that this world, particularly the America we live in now, wasn't created for her. And then that's layered doubly with the fact that she is autistic. She's at a higher risk of being misunderstood and criminalized. She's at a higher risk of not having access to the same curricular resources that I create for my own job. So I begin to really talk out about what her label is, talk to her about being autistic, talk to my village and my community about her being autistic. I have an amazing family who supports us, who comes to therapies with us, and who include her in everything. So, how I broke through that was radical inclusion. There is no place where my daughter doesn't belong. There's no place where she is not welcome. And if she is not welcome, then we are not there as a whole family, as a whole unit. Because in many ways, we stigmatize those in our own community. So, to answer your question, Calvin, how we have broken through that is through this beautiful notion of belonging and radical inclusion. So that's just a little bit about my story of parenting an autistic kid and what that has looked like as we've navigated what stigma looks like for her.
Thank you so much, Kia. That was so powerful. Mary?
Wow, Kia, how am I supposed to follow that? I mean, really. Your story is just really so powerful. Um, Hi everyone, my name is Mary Lucero Hill. I am a case manager for a Red and White program here in Colorado, Denver, Colorado. Um, been doing that for a while. Uh, I do a lot of things. I have a lot of hats now. Uh, I didn't used to have a lot of hats. I used to be the person in the background, you know, behind the scenes and um, hiding myself and hiding a part of me that I was ashamed of and I felt others were ashamed of as well. Um, I'm going to be talking about multiple uh, interactions for me. One of them is I have been diagnosed HIV positive since 2002, which is kind of in the late to early stages of the epidemic. I'm also a woman of color who doesn't know part of her identity. I know my mom's side, but I never knew my dad's side. So half of me is kind of lost in the ether, and I've lived that a long time. Um, the biggest part of me, that's kind of a pun. The biggest part of me is that I want to talk about body image. And I've been a big girl all my life. And I've tried to hide behind that. Um, I tend to say that my weight is kind of like my comfort zone, my cloak, you know, to kind of hide me. Uh, until a few years ago, where I stopped and started thinking and really acknowledging who I am and who I want to be in this world, and started listening to what others have always been telling me, that I need to shine from the inside out and not let others' views of me affect who I am. And so I started doing this body image presentation, and I went full-fledged into it. My one of my first slides has me in three different swimsuits, and one like looking like a 90, honestly. But that's the one that I'm most proud of because I feel most comfortable in it. So I guess for me, um, a lot of it has to do with listening to yourself, listening to loved ones and friends when they say you are more than who you think you are. Learning how to believe that for yourself. And honestly, y'all, it's a process. And it's not like I'm happy every single day with my body. No, there are days where I am so frustrated with it and so mad about it. When it comes to ability, like my mobility sometimes is affected. So learning to navigate through that and sometimes just be okay with it, allowing that moment to happen, kind of like Kia was saying with her daughter, just allowing that moment to happen and bringing folks into it instead of um, trying to push them away. I tend to try to educate, especially when it comes to my diagnosis. I try to educate, bring people into it instead of pushing them away or just placating it. Um, I've worn a lot of masks throughout the years. Uh, and sometimes that you have to do that in order to survive. You really do. Um, when it comes to hiding behind them too long though, that's when the real deep like internalized stigma starts to happen. And it need in order to get out of it, sometimes you have to battle yourself. And it's hard um to feel lost, and it's hard to feel afraid. But there in that vulnerability is courage. And so for me, it was learning how to access that, learning how to navigate it. I'm still a work in progress, and I'm going to forever be a work in progress the rest of my life as long as I'm walking on this earth. And I think that's part of the important thing as well is you're not going to be perfect every day. Nobody's perfect anyway, but you can get as close to perfection as possible by allowing yourself. I allowed myself to just feel, to walk through it, and to allow those hiccups. Me.
Mary, that was so powerful. I have one disagreement with you that there is one person who is perfect, and that would be Dolly Parton, but that's a whole nother conversation. Um, I want to thank you both for the courage and that it takes to share your experience and sharing this space with us today. That it was very powerful for the both of you. So I would like to start with some guiding questions for my two lovely friends up here. And then we would love to take audience questions. So please use the Q&A chat function because that way your questions don't get lost in the chat while we're chatting. So, but for both of you, what strategies or practices have helped you move from internalized shame or isolation to self-acceptance and taking your power back?
Mary, do you want to start or do you want me to
Yeah, we'll go. Just couldn't find my button real quick. For me, uh, it's kind of like I said, it comes in waves. It's kind of like grief in that manner. It comes in waves, and being able to roll with those waves, roll with those punches. It's not easy, and um, I do a lot of breathing through things, a lot of just sitting in the moment and allows to happen uh, in that time in that moment, just so that I prevent myself from further damage, whether it be internal damage or damage from what other people around me are saying or doing or whatever. Those have, I've learned to work with those strategies, with those techniques, whereas I didn't think I needed them before. I thought I'd be superwoman in all aspects of my life. And I'm one that tends to learn the hard way. So um, it took me quite a few knocks to learn this. And like I said, I'm still learning. It gets easier, even though the waves can come harder, it does get easier.
I love that. I'm gonna have to disagree with you once again because I have known you for quite some time, and you are Superwoman. You both are. Kia, what strategies and practices have helped you move on from internalized shame or isolation?
So I want to pivot a little bit and just share another portion of my story to better answer this question because I want to speak personally about shame that I myself internalized. And it wasn't even around my own diagnosis, as Mary and Calvin have both so boldly shared their diagnosis of living with HIV. My oldest sibling died of AIDS in 1996. I say sibling, and I actually shared this with Calvin, and it was very healing in many ways. I say sibling instead of sister because my oldest sibling, Stacy, was a trans woman of color in the 90s when there was only the term tranny or transsexual. We did not understand what gender nonconforming was at the time. We didn't understand what it meant to be um, queer in its fullness as we do now. As we reflected back on Stacy's life and I was able to find some of Stacy's writings, I realized that Stacy didn't feel wholly male or wholly female, but the only way to express how they felt in their own body was to transition to a woman. In the 90s, there was very little known about AIDS. um, and even less known about gender fluidity. I remember after my oldest sibling passed away, my brother Wendell and I went to school and people teased us. I tried very hard not to cry when talking about Kendall. I promise I'm gonna try to keep it together here when talking about Stacy, and I'm gonna weave their stories into each other in this and really talk about kind of the intersectionality of stigma, the shared things here. We were assumed to also have AIDS because we drank out of the same cups. Um, I only got in one fight in high school, and it was because someone called me AIDS girl in the cafeteria. I remember when Stacy came home from New York as Stacy and not as Stanley as she left. And we were at King's Dominion. We were at a local-ish amusement park, and the stairs of her standing beautifully at 6'3", in the clothes and in the expression that made her feel most like herself. And the shame that I felt in my 13-year-old body because folks didn't understand her. For a long time, I carried that shame. I struggled to speak about Stacy. I struggled to understand who and what Stacy was. One of the first things that I did to kind of move from that shame and isolation was naming the shame, actively talking about her, actively talking about the fullness of her identity. I remember at first I would just say, my oldest, sibling died of AIDS. There were times when I did not want to explain that my brother transitioned to my sister, so I would just say, I had a brother who died of AIDS, and that felt icky. So then I began saying I had a sister who died of AIDS without really naming the fullness of what she was. There's beauty in living in the totality of your identity. And Stacy was a beautiful human on earth and has continued to be a beautiful guiding spirit in my life. So to honor her in the fullness of who she is, I boldly name everything about her. She was a trans woman of color. She was gender nonconforming. She lived with the shame and isolation of AIDS in the 90s, and we did not even know until the week that she transitioned that she was not coming home because she had AIDS. I often sit with that now in my 40s and think of what that might have felt like to not feel the loving affirmation of who and what you are as you know that you are leaving this earth. And to sit with the shame of a disease that was so grossly stigmatized at that time that she would have rather died without us knowing, afraid that we wouldn't support her. One of the other things, and we just did this last week when I chatted with Calvin, I connect with people who understand. I do a lot of work with the Baltimore Trans Alliance. The conversation I had with Calvin last week about Stacy, every time I show up as a ally for the trans community and connect with people who truly understand who and what Stacy was, it's healing. It's healing for me. It's healing for the community. It removes that isolation of, oh, I'm quietly carrying Stacy's legacy. The other thing that really stood out to me as I really began reflecting on who and what Stacy was. I had to really think about what it meant for her to finally share 3 days before dying the truth of her condition. My mom's a pastor. Stacy was dying in a hospital where her attending nurse was my aunt. Because of HIPAA laws, my aunt could not share what Stacy was really living with. She hid the truth of her condition in a means to protect herself, but also in a means to not disappoint my mom. And not understanding that when she told my mom was like, and God still created you and said you were good. The vastness of God to create a beautiful being like yourself and still say that you are good. God will greet you on the other side. My mom gave Stacy the permission to transition with the full knowing and understanding that God was waiting for her, was waiting to welcome her back home, exactly how she was created. There's joy in sharing the totality of your condition. There's joy in sharing the totality of Kendall's identity as an autistic, beautiful being. The other thing that I've really tried to do, in particular when talking about Stacy and talking about Kendall, is recrafting the internal story. I always talk about Stacy through the lens of her being created perfectly. There was nothing wrong with her. There was nothing wrong with the way that she identified. There was nothing wrong with Kendall. We are all neurodivergent in one way or another. So I help to rewrite that internal story for myself because I cannot show up as an advocate if I have adapted the narrative that the world has put on either Stacy or Kendall. I could not do this for Stacy, but I try for my daughter. We practice radical self-love. We practice radical self-compassion. My daughter just had a meltdown in a restaurant on Sunday. We didn't leave. We went outside, we calmed her body, we came back in. I explained to her, like, it happens. You get overstimulated. Don't beat yourself up about it. You go in, you sit down, you pivot, and you rebound. My one regret is that Stacy never got to experience that level of radical inclusion and radical self-compassion because of the shame of stigma. So I extend that freely to the people that I meet. I extend that freely to my daughter. I speak about it every chance that I get because it's so important. The biggest thing to move out of isolation and shame is reclaiming your joy and your love for yourself. For Stacy, that joy came when she reclaimed her body expression. When she came home from New York, and I will never forget this, I still make sure there's a black and white tennis skirt in my closet to this day, all the time. And this black and white tennis skirt and a cropped Jimi Hendrix tee, she showed up as herself. She reclaimed her body. She showed up as how she felt best in this skin suit that we wear. That was a part of her reclaiming her joy. I allow my daughter to dopamine dress a lot of times it's wild. Like today, rain boots in her school uniform and it's just a light drizzle. But that is one way I allow her to reclaim her body is to dress in what allows.
Am I the one frozen?
No, it looks like she froze for a second. Let's see if we can get her back in.
Okay. Thank you. I want to, for a moment, just say that there are brief
There we
call.
go. Now
There we
I'm
go. We're back.
back.
Go.
So
Please.
that is how we allow her to continue to honor Stacy because Stacy taught us that a part of reclaiming our joy is that radical reclamation of your body and your expression. I'm not going to cry, so I'm going to stop.
You I appreciate you sharing that with it. And I asked permission before she shared because when we sat down and had our conversation, well, my brief call with Mary and Patty was a brief call because we were like, we're business as usual. Kia and I were on the phone for a while. But that's what happens when you have shared experiences of shame. When you can say them aloud, you find community and it just happens magically. So for Mary, can you tell me what are some of the misconceptions people have had about you or or in your HIV diagnosis or in your feelings about your body? What are some of those things that you've experienced?
I don't even know where to start. There's so many of them. Um, Regarding body image, uh, the thought out there is bigger people can't move, bigger people are lazy, they don't care about themselves. Uh, Maybe, but I know for me, it's more medical. Um, I've taken medications that cause weight gain. Um, my body doesn't move the way that other able body people can move. Even at a lower weight, I wasn't able to do certain things and move certain ways because that's just not the way my body moves. Um, I've known a lot of people who are of bigger bodies and can do the splits, you know, easily, and others that can barely walk. Um, I'm to the stage right now where walking is hard. Um, Doing some things have been really difficult, and that's okay because my body is allowing me to do things that it can do still. You know, I can still stand where others can't. I can still walk for some distances where others can't and may never walk again. So, um, choosing to look at the positive side is what I express to others, what um I choose to look at. Again, not every day is a good day, and that's okay. It's kind of like he was saying, when you're not having that good day, you step outside, you you rein things in, and you go back and you show up the best way you can, you know? And I had to learn how to adapt that so that I can teach others how to do that. And the same thing with my diagnosis. Um, I'm to this day, I'm never going to forget the doctor uh, who first told me. She sat me down, she called me and said, "You need to come in. I got something to tell you." And I figured it was just like, an STD, STI, um, some basic, give me a med, I'll be fine. No, she sat me down, and her bedside manner is what I aspire to be right now when working with clients, working with others. She said, "Your test came back HIV positive. I don't know anything about the diagnosis and how to treat, but I'm willing to learn together with you." And from that moment on, man, I miss her. um, from that moment on, I vowed to myself that no matter what I do, no matter who I encounter, if they have, if I have to dispense news to someone, good, bad, or indifferent, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be that person for them because that person to me made it so much easier to accept, so much easier to understand, so much easier to transition into this new life that I'm having. Um, Having a major diagnosis, whether it be HIV, cancer, having a neurodivergent child, no matter what that diagnosis is, having that one person or people around you to support you is crucial, especially in the early days. And I say days, not even in the early minutes of it. And everyone's different on how they react to information. Um, One of the hardest things for me, which, like I said, I learned the hard way. Um, I ended up telling coworkers before I told family. It took me 10 years to tell my family, where it took me 10 minutes, which was basically the ride from the doctor's office back to work. Yeah, I went back to work, by the way. Um, go back to work and tell my coworkers my diagnosis, only to have it thrown back in my face a few weeks later, um, because of hatred, anger. Uh, One of my coworkers, their spouse came ranting and raving because we lived close by each other, like right across the street, ranting and raving because him and my then spouse got into an argument, yelling, uh, That's the AIDS house. Don't go anywhere near there, you're going to get AIDS. And this is from someone I trusted. This is from art, so I thought I trusted. Um, so yeah, that's been hard. Um, I feel like I went off course. Really do.
If
What
that
was
was
I
our
returning
if that was
to?
our course, that was the most beautiful road you just took us down. I I hear what you're saying because I think to my own experiences, I also went right back to work. Um, and I think about the people that I did tell who I have never heard from again. And all of that, including with something I shared with Kia, that in my early days of my diagnosis, I was very sick. Like I was 112 pounds. I had I had I had not I should have moved on things faster. Um, but people were talking. The bar, people at the bar, the gays, they were talking. And after I did tell my mother, because my mother actually called me and she's like, "You look sick. What is happening?" So she and I sat down, ironically, also to Starbucks, which is where I got my diagnosis from the health department. Um, that's a whole nother story. But the after I told my mother and hearing people run their mouths, my question was, what do I do? And as a relatively defiant human being, um, I wrote on Facebook. I have it screenshot. It's like a mile long. I would never post such a lengthy thing on Facebook ever again, or most things on Facebook for that matter. Um, but it was my way of going, there's nothing you can say now because I just took it all out of your mouth. And that led to seeing that there were people who did accept me. It also led me to my first job in the second, well, technically second job in the HIV space. The first one was a front desk person, but it led me to a job as a peer educator, which I do know that there is I know there's one peer educator who works where I used to at Casey Care here at the conference, and another former colleague, and it was not so much in taking my power back by telling everyone about it. It was in behind closed doors in clinic rooms and the private conversations that no one will ever know about, that where I found my power. It's because the things that people told me that they feared of other people's projections, it somewhere in that time clicked for me that, but that's not true. You're not, if you're like Kia shared about like sharing dishes. I had a client whose family wanted him to use paper plates. I mean, we're talking 2017. That's not that long ago. And somewhere in that time period of working in that position, it was what is true? Are things that people project about people living with HIV or other conditions? Yep, the Tiffany. Uh, are the things that people project on us true? And more often than not, the answer is no. So what is the truth that I'm going to hold on to? And in a world that we live in currently where facts are questionable, the truth is the distance between our world and the truth sometimes is a growing chasm. What are the truths that we hold on to? What are the things that we know to be true? And it doesn't mean that everybody else has to believe you or has to acknowledge that that's the truth. How do you hold on to your truth? Because I think that living your truth, walking in your own shoes, that authenticity, for me in my life, has led to one of my favorite lines in The Color Purple. I have everything that I need to build a bountiful life. And that is not just monetary, that is not, it's certainly not fame or notoriety. That is, my life is bountiful, not only for the work that I get to do, but in the people that I get to encounter. Like the times that I've spent with you, Mary, and Kia, the time that we've spent together. My life is bountiful because of those experiences. Because the truth is the truth. And we know the truth, whether everybody else believes that or not. That is, you can't impact the outside world and their opinion, but you can reestablish what the truth is for yourself and walk in that. And I hope if you do walk in that, get good shoes.
Fruit.
Um, for both of you, has there been Key, if you'd like to go, has there been a specific turning point or people who really started your journey to overcome and reframe those stigmatizing thoughts?
I would definitely say, Dorothy dropped in the chat that my child is blessed to have me as a mother and vice versa. One of the things that I say often is, we say it takes a village to raise a child, but this one child has raised the collective consciousness of our village in so many profound ways. Um, I have found myself leaning on, in particular, two of my good friends who also parent autistic children, because in those moments that I feel like I'm failing, like I'm a horrible mom, I'm letting her down, they reground me in exactly what you were talking about, Calvin, the truth, right? Um, what is actually true? Because that chasm that you were speaking about, projections, internal monologue, society, my own wild thoughts widen that chasm. So I have two really good friends who help tether me to reality, who tether me to the fact that this is not easy. It is not easy to parent, in particular, if you are trying to raise free thinkers in this society. It is not easy to parent children, period. But when you are parenting autistic children in this society, it is that much more difficult. So I've used them to, one, just let me say the quiet things out loud. Because sometimes you gotta say the thing. I gotta say I'm a crap mom. I gotta vent. I gotta do all of that so that I can move forward. And they allow me that judgment-free space to do that. One of the ways that I have really reconciled a lot of how I show up for Stacy has really been leaning on one of my, and I have so many cousins that I shouldn't say one of my favorite cousins, but one of my favorite cousins, because while she was very young when Stacy passed away, Brianna actually I think has done a panel in this conference, is living in Houston right now. She is a beautiful trans woman of color, a prominent advocate in the field. She is a civil rights attorney for the Lavender Project. She also has been read into the Supreme Court to try cases around trans rights. She has allowed me to walk alongside her through her transition, through coming out to our family as first gay, as a gay male, and then as a trans woman. She has allowed me to be on this journey with her in ways that I was not able to be on that journey with Stacy. And she is one person who talks to me a lot about Stacy. the quiet impact that Stacy had on her life as a child, just living boldly and free at that time. And actually, my aunt, who I said was Stacy's attending nurse, was Stacy's best friend. They were, my mom's the oldest sibling, my aunt was the youngest, so they were fairly close in age. So Brianna grew up around Stacy. Stacy was always at their house. She watched Stacy's transition as a child. And to get that perspective of moments when I wasn't there through the innocence of a kid's lens, she has really been pivotal. And outside of people, I was sharing with Calvin, I'm not going to hold you. Watching Pose was so healing for me. One, Blanca looked so much like Stacey that it was just like jarring when I saw her on the screen. But allowing myself those moments of entertainment and levity that still actually embody who and what she was. The same with young Sheldon. I watch young Sheldon and I think of my own daughter. I'm like, it's healing. It's joyful. It's a moment of levity, but I'm able to see them in those two shows, and that has been helpful because this work can get heavy. I mean, heavy than a mug. So even like interweaving those moments of levity have really been helpful.
I think you pointed out something that it's very important, especially in the current sphere that we're living in, is finding those moments of joy and levity to bring us back to center. That I find, like we were sharing earlier, I got to see Wicked early, and it was those 2.5 hours, like nothing else as bad is happening other than the witches being chased around Oz. Like other than that, like nothing else is happening. We do have to escape. Marion, can you share a moment that you realized that your stories or the story of your sister or your daughter can help others heal or see themselves differently?
I'll go. Um, for me, it was to a point where I started speaking, just telling my story. And the more I told my story, the more, and I took power over everything. I took my power back. I created the narrative, and nobody else created the narrative for me. Um, but there was one time I was doing a panel, and this just solidifies for me I was on the right track. Um, I did a panel at a high school, and it was hard enough to get this panel done in a high school anyway, because it was like 2015-ish, maybe. Um, and after talking and being on the panel, one of the students came up to me and she was like, "Thank you so much for sharing. This meant more to me than you know." I don't know what that meant for her, but for me, that was like all I needed to know. I'm doing the right thing. I'm on the path that I need to be on. Uh and now that I wear many hats because of it. I am a co-chair for PWN Colorado. I am on a planning council. I've been on the Alliance before, the Colorado Alliance. It, my work in HIV has just, my advocacy, I should say, in HIV has just exploded because of this diagnosis. I don't think, and I tell everyone this, I don't think I'd be where I am today if I wasn't diagnosed positive. honestly, I think that was the best thing for me.
I think that's so powerful because I feel the same way.
Yeah, and I've heard so many other folks who are diagnosed positive as well say they are the person they are today because of this diagnosis.
Mhm.
And for the longest time, I thought I was the only one that it it took, you know. It's helped me feel better about my body. At times, it's helped me feel better about um, not knowing half of my heritage, in so many ways and so many levels. It's helped me become the stronger person that I am today. Being able to be here and talk to everyone, being on a national stage presenting at USCHA, I would have never thought I would be on a national stage like that. But I did it. And it was scary, but I faced that fear because of all the things I've experienced. And that's what's helped me over the years.
I love that so much.
And it's, uh, when for me, it's hard to say that I'm proud of myself because sometimes I don't see it, sometimes I don't feel it. When I hear myself say things like that, I slowly take it in because I remember where I was and where I am now. And I am very proud of where I am now. Um, I'm gonna start crying. Um, I'm gonna stop there.
I feel like we're on a wicked press tour, you two. I hear what you're saying, Mary, because I think that when you say that, that brings up something we were talking about yesterday in the internalized stigma work group about how internalized stigma is like spoon feeding yourself poison. And so what do you counteract poison with? An antidote? What's the antidote to shame? Taking away its power. How do you saying things aloud that other people are afraid to whisper? And I have to tell you, I'm so proud of you. And I hope you look in the mirror every day and you tell yourself that because that's what I want you to spoon feed yourself. Not poison that the world likes to serve us. I want you to serve yourself pride. Key, was there a specific moment for you in the multiple intersections of stigma that you have encountered in your life that have realized that your story can help others?
Yeah, and Mary, like one of the things that I realize is when I show up as my most vulnerable self. Like I was sharing with Calvin last week, I was like, I don't want to read the questions or anything beforehand because I like to show up as my most vulnerable self. And I just want to pause and just say thank you for the ways that you have shown up as your most vulnerable self in this space because this is where healing happens. Like Calvin said, that is the antidote. When you tell yourself that you're worthy, you're good enough, you slowly remove that shame. Brene Brown says vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. And it is when we sit together in these vulnerable moments, and let me say, it would totally be a Wicked Press tour if we were all together. I'd be holding your hand. I would, it would be your Cynthia, you know, that that is when I realized that when I am showing up as an ally and an advocate, when I am my most vulnerable self, when I'm not afraid to say the things, when I'm not afraid to share with you guys, like I've wrestled. My 13-year-old being wrestled with taking on those stairs as Stacy and I walked through King's Dominion. The first time Kendall had a meltdown in public, I wrestled with that shame of being a bad parent, being the parent of the bad kid. When I show up and I'm authentic and I say those things because someone else has wrestled with that and they've done it quietly and they felt the shame associated with having those feelings, it not only removes the guilt that I had in those moments, it helps to remove that guilt from someone else. So I found that when I'm using my voice in this space, that when I'm showing up as my most authentic and vulnerable self, any and every time I have an opportunity to speak, that's where transformation happens. That's where impact happens. And I have to just thank both of you for inviting me in this space and being here with me, and for all of y'all who are dropping all the love in the chat. This vulnerable moment, this hour and 15 minutes out of today has been healing for me, and I know that it is healing for somebody else sharing this moment with us.
I love that. And I did send a list of questions, and we aren't even going to get through all of them because I believe we have till 11:05, and I'd like to give everyone 5 minutes back to get their bio breaks before the next thing. So I'm going to ask you one last question, and then folks, if you have questions for the panelists, please put them in there. I'd love to get some of those answered for you. Um, but for the both of you, if you could go back and tell yourself one thing that would help you today, or that would help you get to where you are today, what would that be? I'll go with, if I could go back, I would tell myself earlier that 3 letters don't matter outside of taking the medication. It does not detract from value, and that the outside world is tough. They don't get better. You do. And now I'll let either one of you.
Um, I would tell my younger self that you're beautiful just the way you are. Your roles are going to be loved by someone, so love them yourself. You are more than worthy of everything that you want. Don't allow others' words to live in your head. Recreate those words for yourself. Love yourself each day because you are beautiful.
And Mary, I'm going to tell your current self, you are beautiful. You are a beautiful woman externally, but more importantly, that beauty radiates from the inside, and you are worthy of love and all of the bountiful things that life has to offer. Full stop. I would tell my younger self, because I did not realize as an adult how difficult this would be. I am wired to be an empath. I feel the things. That is a difficult life. That is hard. Healers need healers. It was so hard for me to recognize that. I thought that I was just supposed to show up in the space bring my presence, and that was enough. Being tasked with the gift of empathy is hard. And there are days that you are going to feel like you can't carry it. There are days that you are going to pray that gift away, but that gift is beautiful. That fiery spirit that you have might be off-putting to others, but it is going to be powerful for others. And lean into that gifting and find your people, the people who understand you, the people who support you. And on those days, like Mary said, when you don't feel beautiful and don't feel worthy, it is that chosen family along with your God-given family that are going to keep you afloat. So lean on them and don't be so prideful.
Oh boy, we really have had the Wicked Press tour up in here today. Folks, folks, I'm going to give you another chance to put in a question in the chat or the Q&A. Um, while we try to wait for that, is there anything that you all would tell someone else differently than what you would tell yourself?
I tend to tell others what I wish for myself
Mm,
and hope that they follow it, but yet sometimes I don't.
mm,
So when I say something to others, whether I'm working with them as a client or a friend, family, stranger on the street, if I'm dispensing something to them, I need to take heed myself because it's something I need to work on for me. And always be aware of that. And it's not easy to do, and it's not easy to accept. It's very hard to accept some of our faults. Um, but that too is part of life. That too is what makes us the unique beings that we are.
I, yeah, I think we all have a hard time taking our own advice. So easy to like dish it out. Kia, is there something you would tell someone else differently that might be going through something stigmatizing?
Very similar to what Mary said. Often I find when I share with other people, that really was a message for me. And that was my subconscious kind of giving me advice. But one of the things I say all the time to people is really go out and be your weird and beautiful self. Like, embrace all of the things that make you unique, embrace all of the things that make you different. Um, it's so easy to assimilate,
Mm.
so easy
Mhm.
to put on the mask. And honestly, sometimes it kind of feels comforting to be just like everyone else. But if you were created to be different, walk boldly in that difference. And that's hard to say.
Mhm.
That's hard to do. But go out, be yourself, authentically, exactly how you were created to be. Say and do the weird things. Say I love you to people, to strangers. Make it weird for them because that you were called to be different. And if you were called to be different, lean into that and find your little quirky crew. When you find your quirky crew, it's easier.
I love that because the other day I had a moment where I realized for a lot of my life, I have wandered around. I don't make plans for 10 years. I have no desire to make plans. And I realized the other day that I had a lack of role models growing up. Not that there weren't people to aspire to, but there was no one to look to and here is the way we get there. And I don't, it was maybe just like the right amount of margaritas. I don't know. I had this moment the other day that I was like, some people don't have role models because they're the first one. We did get one question in the chat, and then I will close this up so folks can have bio breaks. And it's from Charmaine. She asks someone who is newly neurodivergent with the neurodivergent children, how do you advocate for yourself and your children with the current political climate?
So, Charmaine, welcome. Let me tell you, getting diagnosed neurodivergent as an adult, that's hard. That is tricky. One of the things, particularly right now, understanding that particularly if your kids are school age, we are in an insane climate when the entire Department of Education cuts came by cutting the special education department. One of the best ways that you can advocate for yourself, but in particularly for your children in this current political climate, is one, understanding that, and this is something that I think about a lot for my daughter. When she's having meltdowns, when she's going through it, the older she gets, the more likely that is to be criminalized. So understanding that, one of the things, and this was hard for me to do, and this really took a lot of me putting my pride aside. One of the first things that I did when I moved to the house that I'm currently in, my daughter was getting older and she was an eloper. Um, I went to the police station. I gave them a picture. I just updated that picture this year. I let them know that she is autistic. She may not respond to an officer if you see her out and about. At that time, she was very limited verbal, and she didn't always carry her augmented communication device. I did that for a reason, and it was difficult to do, but I did that because if she were ever to be engaged by the police, and there was ever a moment of wrongful death or assault, you were informed. You knew. I, as a mom, I gave you visual evidence. I wrote down exactly how she presents. I told you where she lives. I gave you her name so you knew. I did my due diligence. But particularly as we're advocating for our kids in schools now, knowing that we do not have the same federal protections that we used to have with the Board of Ed, get well versed in IEP law. Understand what rights your children have. Work with your local agencies. If you live in Maryland, there's an autism waiver so that you can get respite care and things like that as a parent, but also make sure that your children are getting all of the support services, not just in school, but also vocational rehab to help with job placement. Um, Utilize your services. If you do not know all of your services, there are so many free advocacy groups. If you are in the DMV, reach out to me. I will help you. Find a support system because right now, our children are under attack. We are in a day and age where it is easier to keep kids medicated and compliant than teach them strong coping skills. So definitely educate yourself, not just in IEP law, but all of the support services that your children have a right to, and make sure your kids are getting all of the, we say free, but our tax dollars have paid for them, all of the free services that are afforded to them just because you are a tax-paying citizen.
Thank you for that. With that, I want to make sure that everybody has time for a bio break. First of all, want to express my gratitude to you, Kia and Mary, for spending this time with me. I appreciate you coming as vulnerable and human as possible and sharing your stories. That this was a very powerful conversation, and I hope you took away something from it. I'd like to thank Howard and Patty and everyone who organizes this conference. This is my fourth year here at this conference. I haven't cried through any panels until today. But hey, 4 years in running. Um, but I appreciate all of you who have signed on today and stuck with us and listened with intention. And I hope that something struck you. And what we've heard today really is that stigma can separate us, right? But our shared humanity and the storytelling bring us back together. We live in a time where we also have to advocate for change. And it is storytelling and it is I will vote and there's a lot of work, but I think in these spaces where we can do the emotional work and show up human, we all have the power to create spaces like this where people feel seen, respected, and valued. Whether that's in our workplaces, classrooms, clinics, or wherever you hold space. And I think that today is a prime example of if we can hold space, we should for each other. I'm going to leave the session by doing that. I'm going to ask you to look beyond people's labels and lift up stories that heal and connect us all. I wish you health and happiness for the rest of the conference. I hope you have a wonderful time, and I hope you have a happy holiday with your families. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you both so much.
Just blame it on Wicked. That we were full on Wicked press tour.
We
I would
did.
have been tapping your finger.
Yep. But don't hold Cynthia. She asked us not to. All right. Thank you both. I will email you. I would love to. And next time in the DMV, girl, I'll hit you up. And Mary, I will come and see you in Colorado. I'm in Colorado often. All right. I love you. Take care of the rest of your day.
Love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.